I think it's dangerous if you're in a position where you think you know the problem really well and you know what the customer wants, because you may take for granted feedback, whereas like you said, there are always surprises in it and always different perspectives, so that feedback is always valuable.
We are back with another episode of the Cold Star Project, the podcast about the unexpected challenges of scaling. I'm here with Peter Loving, founder of the SaaS Founders and Execs group on Facebook. And we're going to talk today about some of the follies that he has seen with software as a service founders and the folks who interact with his group, all very good people. I've been a member, I don't know, 6-8 months, something like that now. And it's been fun to be in there. So Peter, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Great to be able to come on and talk with you. Yeah.
You bet. Yeah, let's try and help SaaS founders today with some of the most direct things that we can. I always find that software as a service people are great with ideas and they want to jump into the business and solve a problem. They get a brainwave maybe, and then a lot of them go, oh, how am I going to get customers for this? And that is a problem, a serious problem.
Sure is.
You have to overcome.
Yeah.
What have you seen about this, and what are kind of some symptoms maybe around it that would let you know that folks need help in this area?
Well, yeah, I find a lot of founders of SaaS are kind of, like you say, many are ideas people, right? And they also are creative people. They want to build their own thing. They like to build a product. They want to kind of solve a problem. They're also ambitious. They're often entrepreneurial. Now, I find that a really common problem, and one that we see over and over again, which actually still happens, I still see it happening, and I've seen it happen in my group, people talk about it, is that they start building something before they have an idea of what the real problem is, and they start building something before they have a good strong concept of how they're going to get customers and where they're going to come from. So I think that's probably the most common one with the early stage founders.
Right. And I'll have to echo that. I have seen that for 10 years plus.
It's
not a thing that is new, and you would think that people would get that, but tell me a little bit about what you've seen as far as like business fundamentals and that level of knowledge maybe that software as a service creators have that you've seen.
Well, I'm seeing a lot of people in two areas. I'm seeing a lot of people that are very savvy with software, and they understand SaaS. They understand, they're very tech literate. Okay, so they're either technical people, they're developers, or they are very good marketers, but they've been working on the web for a while. So they're building tools that are often almost targeted at SaaS companies. So you see a lot of SaaS products targeted at SaaS companies. So you get this kind of chain of customers, and part of that I can understand why. It's because I looked into this a little bit more, and I found out that software companies are the biggest consumers of software, because by nature. I mean, it makes sense because they're very familiar with it, and they know that systems can improve the way their business works, the speed of getting things done, the efficiencies, and the access to information. So that's one group. And the other group I've seen are people coming into SaaS who are solving a problem from a specific industry or sector, and they're coming from outside of working in tech. So a lot of these things are new to them. They still, lean startup, even though we consider that quite an old concept and book now. These are things that some of these founders haven't learned yet. So they're coming in and they've got really good domain knowledge of their sector and their industry, but they don't have good domain knowledge of building tech and what it takes to make a company succeed in SaaS like that. So I think that's the group that has the biggest challenge with spending a lot of investment, time and money into their product without getting traction. I think you asked about a story. So I've seen people that have spent around $300K building their product and haven't really got customers yet, and in the last year. So, part of what I aim to do in my group is to prevent that kind of thing happening. But I'd see that as kind of like one of the first lessons, really. So it gets much deeper from that. Yeah, but that's the kind of thing I've seen happening. The problems I've seen with founders who are tech savvy and know how to build products. It's just like kind of like the lack of business systems, processes, knowledge, and where to get customers and how to make a repeatable, scalable system for generating customers for their product. Yeah, and the challenges, like funding, building a team, putting processes into place, managing the product. There's just so much work that's involved. So even if they're tech savvy, they have challenges in that area.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah.
In your group and you've got these folks coming in there from two kind of distinct streams that you've been talking about. What's the one thing that you wish you could get across to these folks? Like if you could just give them a pill or push a button or something like that, and instantly they've got it, and that would give them that leg up. You're like, okay, now I can do something to help you folks. What would that be?
Well, see, I tend to focus myself on product. So come from a design background. I studied product design back in uni, and I've worked in design and product design ever since, for software. So for me, it's always the ability to create an intuitive product that has a great experience and really solves a problem. And I find that gets overlooked a lot. It really does. And I see a lot of products with a really bad UI, and frankly, kind of not necessarily solving a real problem. And there's a lot of copycat products. There's a million and one that are doing, similar kind of things, similar CRM, similar chatbot kind of tools now, and they're kind of, some of those are struggling to get traction. Some of them are struggling to find the area. And I understand that's a journey, right? And it depends on the stage and how long you've been going, because some of them that have a bad product and a bad interface, they're going on this journey and they're just at an early stage. So it does take time. But yeah, the one thing that I wish I could give them a pill to it's kind of like what I'm mentioning is kind of three things. It's like, if I could give them a pill that makes their product solve a real problem, with a really good interface and a fantastic customer experience. So it's all coming for me, it's always from a product perspective.
Okay, very good, very good. So we get folks who might be listening to this and going, well, Peter, Jason, how the heck am I supposed to validate a product without having it, right?
Yeah.
What would you tell those folks to do?
So there's a couple of ways of doing this. The way, and it depends again, it's all dependent on the stage of where you're at. So if you're, shall we start with somebody who's starting out and they're at the very beginning?
Sure, let's do with what we see the most common out there, which is SaaS founders getting a brainwave and going and creating a product that solves a problem nobody ever asked them to solve, and then going, oh, there's no buyers for this, darn it. So let's intercept them before they get to that point, let's say, and they're like, oh, I think I should make a SaaS.
Yeah, so the first thing I'd get them to sense check is where their idea came from and the validation of that idea. So is it an idea of something that they needed? Is it an idea that solves a problem? Because I've spoken with several who've had an idea, but it's not necessarily solving a problem. It's like a tool, and fine, there can be use cases for tools, but whether you want to start a whole SaaS company and a whole venture based on that, I'm not so sure. So it's sense check the idea, and then the next thing I would recommend is don't start building a product. Don't let that be your first port of call. Your first step should be essentially trying to make sales. And so I kind of feel like we moved on from the lean model, the lean startup. I feel like it's already kind of an old outdated model to build an MVP and then and go through this. I know it's working for a lot of people, but it's also a very competitive market now, and the barrier to entry is much lower. It's much easier to build tools now, much easier to hire cheap development to get an MVP done. So I even say, and I've said this to many people, start by selling the solution, and that could be, you could solve that by a service, and I think if you can sell the service that solves the problem that you have an idea for, that's one way of validating it. Now, if you can start replicating that service and turning it into a product, and then building a process to deliver that service with a product, it's a much more powerful place to begin with, because you're getting revenue, and you're also learning the challenges of the sale, the kind of objections that you're going to have, the process of that sale. You get much better insights into your pricing point. And there are challenges with that as well. There are challenges of taking a service and then pivoting that into being delivered by a product. But there are many cases where that journey is actually a really powerful journey, and can transition quite well into building product. So that's one way I'd say to really consider starting kind of that way.
Okay, Peter, I'm excited over here to hear you say that you don't like the lean startup MVP model, because I've been thinking that for a while, but I haven't told anybody. And so
Yeah.
to hear you say that is like, oh my goodness, somebody else is agreeing. Like they think that way too. Huh.
Yeah. I've thought that way for a while now, and the more people I see that are doing, that it was a really good, a novel approach at the time, but it's been 10 years or more. So,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
things are
I
changing
like
so
lean.
fast.
I'm an operations improvement guy. I like this stuff as much as the next guy. And I like the whole idea is not, okay, get your venture capital funding and then create this bloated thing because you can afford to, right? We're fighting against that. However, there's something cheap about the MVP model that I feel anyway, where it's like, this isn't quite enough. Like that customer experience thing that you're talking about is so important. Right, and we go back to Jeff Bezos' interview from Amazon from the 90s. Has been coming up a lot in my LinkedIn feed where people are sharing it, right? And he's saying it's all about customer experience and having distribution warehouses close to the customers is really important so that they get a great customer experience. And the interviewer clearly didn't get it and kept asking him, well, why aren't you an internet-based company? You're not an internet-based company. What are investors going to think? And he said, I don't care. Essentially,
Yeah.
I care about customer experience, and I believe that the MVP model leaves a lot to be desired in that customer experience.
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of that model was to be able to validate an idea with minimal effort and input of both work and resource, right? But the fact is, sometimes, and I've seen this happen, is that the idea doesn't get validated because the quality of the execution doesn't get the buy-in. So that can happen too, So yeah, there are a number of reasons. I mean, there's great things and also other things, but the thing is that the systems now are kind of in development, right? So the next way, I mean, social media is changing so much now, that another strategy is to become more and more focused, almost in a niche or a certain market. It's just to really narrow down. And although that can feel sometimes like you're minimizing to the smallest degree that your potential customers, that seems to be the way people are getting traction now. So rather than a kind of MVP to a larger market, it's maybe a kind of service or solution to a very focused market and building out from there.
They recognize this is clearly for us. This is clearly for me, as opposed to something that we slap together and hopefully appeals to a broad range. And so the buy-in comes from that. That interaction that is required from learning the sales process, though, I think results in, if you get a good feedback loop going, understanding of what features that the target market values, because I've learned as a copywriter for over 20 years, the stuff that I think is important is never the stuff that they think is important. It's always different, and that's frustrating and weird, and I begin to think, what, am I from another planet? But they don't like the stuff that I like, and so if I'm to write or try and sell something to them, I need to find out what they value as opposed to what I value. And I think that reflection will make you create a better product and a better customer experience, right? As opposed to the MVP model.
Yeah, I mean, one of the old recommendations was to build a product based on a problem that you have, and I always still hear people say scratch your own itch, and I've kind of grown to dislike that term, but only because of overuse, and also it's just the fact is that once you start building the tool, you're encountering different problems. You're kind of already moving away from scratching your own itch, because now you are a little bit distanced from the problem that you had at the time. So how many times do you hear founders talk about, I had this problem and then I started this product, and then they're 2 years, 3 years down the line, and the problem may have changed and they're not so connected to it. So getting feedback, I think it's dangerous if you're in a position where you think you know the problem really well and you know what the customer wants, because you may take for granted feedback, whereas like you said, there are always surprises in it and always different perspectives, so that feedback is always valuable and informative.
And I'll share with our listeners that feedback loops, even after 20 plus years of real world experience in my neck of the woods anyway, feedback loops are the hardest things to get going. So if you have trouble with them, don't beat yourself up. It's normal, in my experience anyway, to have trouble getting feedback loops set up.
What have you found the hardest things about that? Is it just building a process that actually goes all the way around, and that you have, the time factor of actually finding some insights and building that in to your service?
Yeah, it's like first of all, I'm a process engineering guy, right? The whole company is based around that. So to have trouble with this is kind of funny, right? It's like, wait a minute, this is the area of expertise. So if we're having trouble with it, I know the world out there is having a ton of trouble with it. I think the biggest thing for us is we can't possibly think of everything. And so we kind of have to stub our toe in order to realize that there's a problem there. And that usually results in a troublesome experience at least once. And then we build it in so that that doesn't happen again. But to know, you need this experience base to know, okay, that's going to be a troublesome area, or I've seen something similar to this before. I find that happens a lot. And then you can try and set it up and automate it. But sometimes there might be the 2-week lag that goes by, and then you find out, and you constantly, like, the urge to beat yourself up and go, darn it, we're supposed to be good at this stuff. How did we not see this? How did we not realize that this was going to happen, right? There's that law of unintended or second order, third order consequences, where you change something and it breaks a feedback loop that you had set up, and you don't even realize it for a couple of weeks. And in the meantime, something horrible happens. So I think it's just unexpected, unplanned for roadblocks or speed bumps that keep coming up.
Yeah, and I think I don't know what your experience and listeners' experiences is, but I find that systems and processes are one of the hardest things to implement into businesses. They're the most valuable part, but also one of the most difficult. So particularly for the type of founders we were just talking about, the very early stage, they have a real struggle with the resource of having a feedback loop in place and then actually implementing the necessary changes into their product or the way they deliver their product or result. Whereas opposed to a fairly mid-stage SaaS company that may have had a couple of rounds of investment and they've got a team, so they have up to 100 staff, that they'll have a growth team that's focused exactly on this. So where I live in Barcelona, one of the biggest SaaS companies here is Typeform, which you're probably familiar with. And I went into a talk at Typeform, and they explained how their growth teams work. And their growth team is 4 people, and they're constantly focusing on like very detailed things, parts of like the behavior on the pricing page or behavior on a certain sign up. So for them, they can build this kind of fast engine of feeding back, getting the insights from the loop, feeding it back, testing, monitoring the results, and gauging the improvement, and then starting another test. So ideally that's the kind of situation a good SaaS company wants to be in, but it's just implementing that early on when you're limited for resource and team members. That's the difficult part, and I think you have to be very careful choosing what kind of feedback loops you're focusing on, and the scale of them, so that you don't waste time and that you choose ones that are actually going to make an impact.
Right. Yeah, well, and we all know Pareto's law, the 80-20 rule. A small number of decisions or activities produce the large number of results, right? And so what you're saying there about Typeform's growth group needling in on these tiny behaviors on one page, right? That's where the impact happens. So great. Yeah. Focus your effort on that. I love to hear that. For a new, my experience with this podcast was I initially talked to a lot of agency owners and SaaS founders, right? And I've moved more to manufacturing and other topics in that. And I found in the first 6 months of doing this podcast, the SaaS founders that I talked to, if they were under $1 million ARR, they would not focus on processes and systems. But as soon as they got to around that $1 million point, they seemed to get serious about it, right? In my point of view anyway, and knuckle down and start learning about systems and processes. Before that, it was very difficult to talk to them about it. They didn't really want to hear about systems and processes. They just wanted to hear about churn and sales growth.
So what was your general impression, that they didn't see the importance in it at that stage, or they just, perhaps, I get the impression they have so much going on, trying to make, get growth and traction.
Right. And my pushback on that would be, if you had the processes in place, it would help you get the growth.
Yeah, quite.
Because selling that idea has been tough. I'll say that.
Yeah, I suppose it is.
Under $1 million.
Yeah. Well, some of those processes and systems are ways to gain traction, right? Like gain product market fit and grow. So in the very least, they it would put them in a good standing to implement some kind of product market fit process for their early stage, kind of early attempt at traction.
Peter, tell us a little bit about. We've heard about the group and the folks in it, and what you were hoping, like, okay, I can stem the tide of craziness, right, and try and give them a bit of a foundation to give them a good head start in that. Tell us about the kind of service that you offer, that you personally offer to help SaaS companies, and where should they be at in order to sort of plug into that, or get on the ride, I guess, and be taken to a destination.
Yeah. So the main thing that I do is consult on product, but really the kind of main areas are UX and UI. So and this can work for companies at different stages. So it can be the first iteration of a product, that if a company has a good idea of their product and they've shown that they've demonstrated that there's a demand for it, that they have the ability to take on customers, that they've kind of proved that there's a problem and now need to build their kind of first iteration, I would have said of an MVP, or perhaps their first actual version of their product, then helping them with that and the design of that fundamentally. But really, the place where there's the most impact is where companies have already got their product and they've gotten some growth, and now they need to make improvements to it. The UI is probably not to the quality level that it needs to be. The interactions are probably not as great as they should be, and the UX needs improving. But there are different processes, and like with any kind of service, each customer is unique. I certainly find, and the struggle is kind of fitting them all in to a set service. So I do consult quite closely based on the needs and requirements, where they are, what kind of customers they have, what kind of utilization they have for those customers, and whether they have any issues with retention and this kind of situation. Because the thing that I want to avoid is to have them investing in UI when there's problems that need to be addressed first. And UX, one of the areas where UX can come in is there. So I might either say, these are problems you need to address, or you need to rethink the experience, rethink the way the product works, and rethink these issues. So part of that is identifying common issues. But generally, I find, we spoke about common challenges that SaaS founders have, right? But I actually find they're a really intelligent group. Generally, they're very, very savvy and switched on. A lot of the customers and clients I might can be smarter than me, right? So they usually have a really good handle on what they need and where their product is and the challenges they have. So my kind of, a lot of the times I'm consulting with them to really get to the bottom of that, and then implementing product design related services that are going to make a really big impact. Yeah, generally that. So yeah, focusing on product.
Okay. Is there an ARR level that they should be at, or?
You see, generally, I know a lot of people kind of like to categorize customers like into this way to find the best fit, but I have worked with ones that are at kind of 10k MRR, ones before that, and ones that have been turning over like over $1 million ARR, you know, ones of 10 million ARR. So yeah, I guess part of it really does vary. It really does vary. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's part of a system. Part of a system or process for me might be to really hone that.
Right.
Hone that in, you know.
Right.
And find the sweet spot.
I'd be curious at what point the SaaS founder goes, okay, we've got something, it's repeatable, we've demonstrated that it can make money, we're actually helping somebody solve a real problem, but we know we're weak in some areas and we need some guidance on what to do next. And is there a trend at what point in the revenue or customer count or something that they feel good about that?
Yeah, it can be quite early on, because there are two situations. There's one where they don't necessarily have a product team yet, so it's fairly early on, and they're not at the stage where they want to start hiring in-house designers and product managers, and then oftentimes some of the founders are doing that themselves. Or there's a later stage where it's a really busy product team, and they need some kind of consulting and additional help. So those are the typical ones I've seen, the typical stages.
Okay.
Yeah, I haven't attributed an MRR or ARR to that just yet. We'll see. Maybe I'll be clear on it in a year from now.
What's the most surprising thing that you have had come out of your group? Like just having the group and interacting with the folks in there, is there anything that's been like, wow, I didn't expect that to keep coming up over the period that you've had it?
It sounds hard to say this, but the thing that surprised me the most is the low quality of products out there. The low quality of it, and at first I was surprised by it, and then later on, I started to, come from the perspective of thinking, okay, well, there are a lot of people that I now realize are launching one product after another. There are a lot that are trying to get into the marketplace, and they've maybe built an MVP or a landing page. So these really early stage ones. So I'd say low quality products and me too copycat products. That's the thing that surprised me the most. And I'd like to kind of help people reduce that. Either stop doing it and give things come from a different angle when launching a product. But then you get that in every industry. And I also think Facebook is, whilst it does have a really good quality and engagement, I don't think the best SaaS founders are very active. I can't say a blanket statement like that, but there are highly engaged, high quality founders, but I still think the busiest, most successful founders have a very limited time in Facebook groups like the one I have. Yeah, would you tend to agree with that?
Yeah, I will absolutely agree. Yours and Aaron Krall's group are the two that I see the most. And eventually, or occasionally, we'll have some super duper Ring Central type guy come in, swoop in, right? We're lucky to have Andrew Fletcher of Convertry in these groups and talking and whatnot. So he's kind of at the good level. And I know he gives a damn about design and user experience, because in his group, and he's got Neil Merton there helping, they talk about this all the time, and they have email sequences, right, that come out and tell you this is what we've created. There's convertory happiness, which tells you these are the improvements we've made, the bugs we found, and the feedback we got, right?
Yeah.
And I'd
Yeah.
love to see more founders doing that. So
yeah, it's great when it is really great when you get those those type of founders in there, and founders that are over $1 million ARR and above, and they are there. They are, and because I have we all have some questions set when you enter the groups, and I see some that will say they're at 5 million ARR when they enter, but you don't hear a lot of activity from them. So they're in the group, and they are probably observing, and they are seeing what's happening there, but it's great when they do occasionally input, but I understand that they've got pretty demanding time management situation. Let's put it that way.
All right. Well, I have super enjoyed having you on the show, Peter. I'd like to bring you back in a few months for a discussion about UX specifically.
Sure.
I think that would be fun if you're open to it. And
yeah, I'll be happy to. I've enjoyed the chat too. Yeah.
Where can people connect up with you? Obviously, that group. I'll let you say it out.
Yeah, the group is SaaS Founders and Execs. You can join there. On my website is peterloving.com. Just my name, peterloving.com. And yeah, it's generally my main activities on the group and publishing on the site. So also recently I've started to manage SaaStock Local in Barcelona. Are you familiar with SaaStock, Jason? No. Okay, so
I could stand to hear more about it.
You're familiar with SaaStr in the States? SaaStr. No. So I think SaaStr is the world's largest SaaS conference, and SaaStock is Europe's largest one.
Gotcha.
And now they're currently expanding in a similar model to Startup Grind. So they're opening chapters in major cities across the world. So I'm currently involved in managing SaaStock Local for Barcelona. So that's another point. But that's only for people very local. But we do publish. We will be publishing the live videos, interviews.
We could certainly talk about that. Because even though it is a local experience, there are locals everywhere, right? So folks in different places would probably like to hear about the experience and maybe do something similar. Yeah.
There are great talks that come from it. So they will also be published on SaaStock kind of live as we do those talks. So that's another place you can see things.
If you want to shoot me a link or two to connect up to this and put in the notes after.
Sure, I will do.
Those in there. For folks listening, thanks for being here. There are a couple of other interviews in my podcast that Peter made me think of. One of them was with Jonathan Kikebush of SEO Butler, titled Scaling Results by Radically Improving Your Product Infrastructure. He had done very well and had this sort of ramshackle, hooked together Christmas tree ornament type thing of fulfillment, and then went, wow, we've got to invest some money in redoing our website and our processes entirely. And so we had a show discussing that process. Also, for customer feedback and hearing the complaints of your competitors' customers so that you could get feature ideas and pain points and that kind of thing. Stephen Monaco, that was an early interview, talking about voice of customer programs, I think would be very good for folks to listen to. So thanks for being here, Peter. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers for having me. Enjoyed speaking with you.